Hey, folks, welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching this afterwards, thanks so much for tuning in. And I just wanted to start. Is there any sort of burning question that Eric or Fred or Danny or Donna that you have that you're like, hey, we've got Ed, who I think is the real expert. What's going on that you're like, hey, this is the issue I'm dealing with. What do you think?
How about homelessness? Housing for homeless. We're having kind of a crisis here
Hmm.
in Bloomington.
Yeah, lots of cities are. There that falls under this talking about housing for shelter. So in a lot of the cities I've been working with, the way well, there are ways the cities are dealing with homelessness that is not a very humane way, right? We put things out that kind of move them along. Um, I have seen and experienced jurisdictions that bus people out to different places. Um, it is a really big challenge. Usually, homelessness is overlaid with other struggles that are out there. In my own community, one of the things that I found really kind of going to the root of this is that there are lots of really great organizations that can deal with various aspects that lead to homelessness or various aspects that are contributing factors to homelessness, but they're all kind of siloed. And in our community, we're like one of those old towns and I'm in West Virginia, so we're kind of at the north tip of the South. You know, we have like 15 churches on our main street, and they were all struggling. They all had enough to kind of support themselves, but not enough to support somebody else. And about 10 or 15 years ago, they all came together and said, we're going to take all of our little bits and compile it all together into one organization that will represent us. And what they are working on through there, it's called Community Combined Ministries. They've pooled their resources to deal with that struggle. So if you don't have housing because you can't afford stuff, well, they have they add dignity to the process. So they have the food bank, they have the clothing bank. They go through um, all of those aspects. When I was at the city in charge of code enforcement and rental registration, we had some of the worst slumlords you could imagine. We actually had a tenant die in a place that they should not have been in, and I felt really bad because it was on our watch. We all knew this was a terrible place, and this tragedy struck. Um, we worked with Community Combined Ministries and code enforcement to help the people that were in that housing insecurity of making sure we weren't putting them out on the street by trying to penalize a landlord. So, like one of the things that was always a struggle, we were privileged to get information when water was going to be shut off on properties. So, from code enforcement, we could take action. Our action was to call the landlord. The landlords didn't know their water would be shut off. They find out after the fact, and it was probably also a time that they were going through some sort of eviction. So we looked at kind of the next smallest thing we could do. First thing is we called the landlord and said, "Look, you've got a situation, your property, you need to get the water on. This is like $100, like to turn the water on." Um, but they would say no, or well, I don't want to do it, and that'll be my name. They'll use all that water. We were able to get the landlords in town to start a fund at Community Ministries for water shut off. So the landlords didn't care. Like $100 was nothing to them in the cycle of doing business. The fact that they could give $100 to somebody as a tax write off or $1,000 for a tax write off and have a service when this occurred. The other thing is when Community Combined Ministries would show up at a property that had water shut off, they would go through and look at all the other services. Was there an elder abuse or some other criminal activity? How do we keep people so they're not on the streets? How do we get them into the program with a social worker? That's So there's lots of different avenues for it. I leverage code enforcement. I leverage the resources I had on the ground in my last community of working these things up. So one, raising an awareness of what was happening, because by the time somebody is homeless, when they show up at the shelter at 6 o'clock at night, it's too late. If even 48 hours earlier, there may have been something for us to get them sheltered. Um, so yeah, and I like as a city, we were terrible at social work. Like don't get cities involved with that. But we had other organizations that did. A lot of folks, the services through Health and Human Services in our state, it was a 15-minute or 15-mile car ride to get to that service. So I'm working at the fast food place. I have to get my kids from school. Um, I don't have a car. How do we get there? And again, working with our not-for-profits, working with our churches, they could do that. At the city, we did everything we could to prevent dragging somebody on the street, and we used we had one lady that um, we had to get her out of her house. It was not safe. She was losing it because of she didn't pay her taxes, all that type of stuff. And our partner was the hospital. Believe it or not, we were able to find and get like things set up. So every time I had a housing issue like that, we had a little group of folks relying on community ministries, our senior center, some of our church leaders. We pulled in the hospital. We needed it, the health department, whoever we needed to try to help with the preventative piece as much as possible. And whenever those groups asked for stuff, we did mini grants every year. So $10,000 out of ARPA or out of the extra funds that came from somewhere, the reserves over a year, whatever those little funds are, those groups can do a lot of work with that. So we kind of figured out what their expenses were, and then we made sure we had some sort of annual grant every year. Our elected officials loved it because they could do the big check. But we knew on the ground that we were able to like help people in our own community. So yeah, no easy one thing for that.
Well, I appreciate that. Several years ago, the city, the town, and the county got into an intergovernmental agreement, and the city and town um, contribute a small portion of the sales tax. The total's about $1 million annually, and a group of uh, service providers get together in a commission and try to survey, the homeless and all the other issues that are out there, youth justice involved, and use that money to provide some kind of services. But what I really like what you said about having the landlords, contribute $100 to make sure that things like water or heat or whatever can be paid. I think that would be out
Yeah,
of the box thinking that we could use here.
yeah, they make a donation to whatever that group is. That's a not for profit. The tenant never knows the landlord has paid that. That's the beauty of it. And the landlord, like when they understand it's a business deal, it's charitable, they get the praise that they've contributed and they're on that group. They always, and I started with the folks that were the uh, real estate agents managing rental properties. They didn't want the headache. So if the water turned on, all of a sudden code enforcement disappeared, right? So they didn't have to deal with me as government. So we all had the dance and we talked about it and did that. And that helps to keep that fund moving. Just again, we're buying the time that we need to fill that really critical need. And there are great groups that understand how to do that. Understanding the census data of who like those sorts of groups. This is a high veteran group. If it is, there are groups in the veteran community that could be helpful for that. Um, so that those are the things that just like trying to stabilize. Definitely worth doing.
Well, and it is a situation as well where this is taking the view of, strong towns that like part of what we're trying to do is just make things a little less worse than they otherwise would be is needed in order to try to temper it. So, much like we would love, to see a circumstance in which there is zero homelessness in a place, the struggle and the reality is that even places like the city of Medicine Hat, where they actually set out a press release saying we have solved homelessness in our city, and they got press coverage for it. Just a few years later, it was a much more prominent, much more visible issue that they were challenged with, in part because none of the underlying sort of regulatory things had been changed. And so there are simple or I mean, I should not use the word simple, but there are core modifications of existing zoning bylaws, existing development standards that can be modified to allow the next increment of housing to emerge in a place. And this is where I do want to call attention to Ashley Salvador's, who's a city council member up in Edmonton. Her master's thesis looked at who lives in backyard, like accessory dwelling units, or in their case, they call them garden suites. And her research showed, as she interviewed all of these different property owners, that the vast majority of them were either making them available for family members or for friends, or were making them available at below like what you might expect as a regular rent. The rent was either severely subsidized or just like people were living there for free. And that is one step up from couch surfing, so that if you are renting in a sense on your own from a landlord, then if you are renting sort of in a subsidized situation, then you're couch surfing, then you're homeless. And couch surfing may or may not be part of that sort of that pattern. But we have so few of those middle options between renting on your own and then renting something that is made available to you, unless you go into the institutional pipeline. And even then there's capacity issues, there's sometimes fit problems, and so it's thorny and complex. But certainly there are many things that need to be done with some rapidity to make the problem a little less worse or a little less intense, to head off the floodwaters of just the real need in our communities.
I had a really interesting conversation with Monty Anderson recently. So Monty Anderson does Neighborhood Evolution. He's a developer. Um, this is something that actually is really near and dear to him. He grew up in a very impoverished family, and grew up out of that. And in every one of his projects, every single one of those that he shows, there is a corner that is carved out for somebody that is, struggling at the worst possible case. Like he's always carved that out. Um, what he was finding in Dallas and Duncanville, what really infuriated him is there was plenty of money to address many of the problems in the community. The problem was it was allocated to the wrong places. So there were the big facilities to help folks in like one central location, but you couldn't get to it. And he's like, look, I've got buildings all over the city. Really what we need is a social worker in some neighborhoods on every block, in other areas every couple of blocks. And we can lease out a small space to them to do that, to deal with all those urgent emergency issues, to get them teed into all of the different social services, get them signed up for the food, whatever they need for food, clothing, financial resources, health resources. We could do all that in small clinics. And in his model, it was like, okay, if there's a cluster in an area that we need to deal with health, we can actually build out a small incremental health facility in that service center. Like we can build out these things just like we would do a traditional town. That type of knowledge and experience only happens from somebody that's been through the system and somebody that is integral with it, like actually being in the places, watching how services occur. There's very orderly ways to do it. And just like we would say for anything else, that orderly thing, well-intentioned, it's not the best way to do it. It's the more chaotic, the most localized area, focusing on a neighborhood. And this type of approach, instead of putting a big center in, that smaller footprint, it adds dignity to the service and it builds a community up with it. So yeah, he's somebody that at some point we're going to have to get him on just to talk through that, because it like just brilliance in how he explains how this could be addressed. But not what we all, at least that's what we've written him up on his projects about. But there is this other side to it that's really impressive that he's doing. And he loves to talk about this stuff too, Donna. So if you rang him up and said, hey, I heard about you on Strong Towns, he would talk your ear off because he would love to talk through all that.
send me information, because the plan that they brought forward, the shelter wants to expand, and they wanted to use the county tax dollars to purchase a 5-acre land with an old hotel, and use it, for 50 rooms of non-congregate housing out on the periphery of town, no bus service, no, food, nothing, and really no place for the service providers to stay on site or anything. The sheriff didn't think it was a good idea. A lot of the people thought, well,
Yeah.
yeah, this is just not a good idea. So what you explained really makes sense to me.
Yeah, I would. Monty's doing this right now in Duncanville. His project in Duncanville. What he's acquired is a shopping center, and he's created an empowerment center there. So he started out with co-working. His model from an economic side is like what he'll do is to take a parking lot and do the farmer's market in the parking lot. And his strategy is, let's find the lowest bar of entry for commercial work. So if somebody can do really well in a tent and a grill in the parking lot, he will work up to get them into one of his food halls or as a tenant into the building. Because like if you can do that in this project in Duncanville, which is his hometown, right across from City Hall, this next piece of it is he's infilling the parking lot with housing. So he's doing the housing at scale. He's doing it with equity built into it that is making it affordable by design to help to fill that market too. So there's probably a business plan of looking at that. And the beautiful thing with Monty's stuff is that he's really adverse to government. So he can help teach and share like how we can do this on an incremental way that you can have people do that, and really maybe all they need is a small gap or better financing, which you have the ability to do. And you're talking about a small thing that has a return on it versus a really big thing that instead of helping 50 people, if you're building stuff and getting the trades going, we're helping hundreds of people in addition to just the individuals in a home. So I'll send you Monty's information, and he just share that we talked, and he'd love to share what he's doing.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
And your comment about it being on the periphery and being sort of in a place where a hotel or a motel failed is also one of those things that if it lacked the capacity to create sort of economic vibrancy, those are not then the best locations for people that are already struggling with a lack of economic vibrancy and opportunity to be sort of situated, as well to, if possible, try to address the scale, because the scale of a 5-acre site is very considerable in the context of many people needing to be sort of in various different neighborhoods. There is no central cluster where they would be necessary. If this was a site in the downtown, it would much more likely be a 1/2-acre site or a 1-acre site at most in terms of the footprint of the facility. But adjacent to it would be a lot of other uses and a lot of other sort of things that help to dilute the sort of the immediacy of, hey, this is a space that is serving people with very complex needs. But then adjacent to it, you can actually create the conditions for a lot of other people that are serving other needs that maybe are less complex or more easily understood. And the pathway also into other types of housing is much more sort of fluid when you are in a downtown area, or when you're in an area where there is something adjacent that you could conceivably be in without losing your detachment to your place. In Milwaukee, we heard a presentation from Hope Mission in Milwaukee. It is a Christian or a faith-based organization, but they described their method and their model. And one of the things that they've done is they've slowly acquired different properties, made them available for people to come into their program, mainly families with children. Is they recognize pretty quickly they can't only be a place that provides free shelter or like deeply discounted subsidized shelter, they actually began to convert some of their units into not quite full fair rent, but to the point where as someone's income would grow, they didn't income cap them and say, you've got to go, we're going to, you need to leave. Instead, they say, now you have, in a sense, matured your unit to be one of the units that you're going to pay more rent on. But the consequence of it is these were their lions, their champions in the community of a positive path forward. And so I could get you I'll look up the contact info for the person that did the project there. They've been at it for a while. She said there's a lot of tears, a lot of struggles, but from the perspective of getting places where there is adequate affordable housing, one of the great challenges is that income caps do create the conditions where people are. There's always going to be that gap unless you allow the maturing of housing stock to become. It went from being subsidized, or it went from being free to subsidized to then being market rental, but not in a displacing way. And that's, I think, a really powerful insight. And I think a lot of cities, when they work with service providers, on the one hand, we want fairness. So we do restricted by income, or we say if you earn, if you're living large, you shouldn't be living here. But actually, when we want to cultivate prosperity, those are the very types of pathways we want people to see for themselves if they remain in the place. And so it also brings to mind Majora Carter's comments, like if you shouldn't need to leave your neighborhood to live in a better one. But if you are starting to see your conditions improving, do we actually give thought to that and have the imagination to really know what that looks like for someone as they emerge in a place sort of, or rebuild themselves, sort of like to be homelessness for a time can feel like being in a cocoon stage, and you're not sure what the emergence is going to feel like when you step out of it. And so there's a lot of, Monty's a wonderful resource on that, and his ability to just look at problems and identify like 8 different solutions or 8 different sort of paths forward is really powerful.
I have a quick question for Donna, actually. Donna, do you know if your county, city, what have you, has a 24-hour crisis response unit? Um, it became mandatory in California in July that every county has to have one, and I know they are getting a lot of use, but obviously I know that's not a nationwide program.
Well, actually, yes, McLean County is a little bit more forward thinking for the state of Illinois, and we do have a crisis unit, but it is primarily for mental health.
Yeah.
Not just the homeless. And but yeah, I think that a lot of the issues, and there's a book out there about homeless is the housing related to housing. So if you build more housing and that is affordable, you will reduce some of the homelessness. And then what you would be left with would be those that would benefit from the social services. There'd be fewer. And the social services and shelters would not be overwhelmed then.
Yeah, I mean, so often that there's overlap when someone is experiencing homelessness, obviously, that, with substance use disorders and stuff too, that, a lot of that stuff can be co-occurring. I know that when they started the service, they had a high increase in hospitalizations because a few months after the service started, people really started to to know about it. And so people that had been living on the streets with substance use disorders uh, never had someone contact them about getting them connected with services. So um, I know that we've experienced a change and it's been good, and I've heard good things. But I'm glad to hear your area has that as well.
You're muted, Norm.
That's a first, guys.
Oh no!
I don't know where he's never found that button before in our meetings.
My colleagues wish I had a mute button, but Edward, any closing thoughts on the homelessness? And then we'll pivot to the one of the pre-submitted questions. But
yeah, it's. Let me just say, it's a really difficult issue. There's lots of really thoughtful people out there working on this, and as this goes on, as you all are exploring this, I would share this in our community page on our Action Lab. Share what's happening. If you have more questions, drop it in there. We have a lot of really thoughtful people in the organization and then in the movement that I know would love to contribute and share some of those ideas. So take advantage of that tool.
Yeah. And I'll just add this in, if anybody is interested in doing so, the community section on our Action Lab. So you can find this by clicking on the search link on the Strong Towns website. But then we do have a whole community section here. You can talk with the Strong Towns community if there's specific local conversation questions, or a job board if you have a group, someone in your region that has a job posted and you're looking for Strong Towns candidates to fill that. We do encourage people to post openings there. And then if they're candidates that are Strong Towns aligned, to kind of look there every so often and take a quick peek. But the Strong Towns community, we do actually put in some of the different questions that we do receive. And we're pivoting. We're going to do a larger launch to encourage more people to come check this out. But let's go into a pre-submitted question, which is from Aaron Leung, who asks, what can we do if the city denies or ignores our participation / petitions to urbanism? So if I understand the question, Aaron is asking, like, hey, when we try to get involved, or when we submit a petition on a particular topic, our city is just totally ignoring us, stonewalling us, completely not paying attention. Edward, you wrote a great piece called how to address or how to survive the technical brush off, or what to do about the technical brush off. But I would definitely say, Aaron, check out the local conversations program, because that is going to be a critical part of it. But if I were to say, in a world where a local conversation does not yet exist, what is some of the advice that either you, Edward, or Donna might have for people that feel like they're being ignored, either as they try to participate? I love the distinction, participating and petitioning. There's asking the city to do things, but also being willing to do things. And what advice do you have?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, because I have friends that are upset that something is broken in the city. Everybody says it's broken. Nobody will do anything. We are in a position in local government where we have established ourselves in an adversarial position with citizens, right? If you want to get a fence in your backyard, you have to submit a form to get permission, and you get told what is wrong or right with that. This is how that's set. There's two different kind of operating systems that we're working in. As a citizen, we would expect, hey, I raised a concern, I'm paying my taxes, we have the staff, I've elected folks in, they should move forward on it. In local government, they have lots and lots of procedures and rules and ordinances and things they have to do to keep everybody equal. The more complicated the system is, it's actually more fair. So that's this whole kind of screwed up piece to it. What you really need to do is really understand this system to figure out where you need to be communicating and talking. Showing up at a council meeting or a public workshop is too late. Decisions have already been made. And as well, meaning that we have public comment before we do an ordinance change. That ordinance change has been going on for years. The example we used, the parking example from Norman, Oklahoma, that changed one word, that was approved in 2023. They started the conversation in 2013. This is just how government goes. So by the end, everybody's exhausted. They're finally over the hurdle. We just want to get it done. If you want to really seek action, if you really want to work at that most local level, the thing that is most powerful is a cup of coffee or a box of donuts. And I'm really you need to do that and come to City Hall and meet with the staff, meet with the people that are in those departments working through that. Your elected officials, we just had a really wonderful locomotive tour stop with an elected official. She goes, look, if I get 5 people that email me on an issue, that's a lot. And she's in a city of 60 or 70,000 people. So like people are not they're not reaching out. You have an opportunity to reach out and meet with your elected officials and talk to them. Um, and if they don't set a meeting with you, if they ignore you, now you have something to talk about at a meeting about that. But you get to know your municipal staff. Understand they're in an operating system. Don't hate them. Don't drag them through the mud. It's actually the operating system. You need to hate the game, not the player. So get to know those folks. Uh, every one of those playing groups, every municipal staff, they have different places that they hang out and go, and things that you can connect with them on. Do that. You also want to start to build up your ammunition and build your political capital early and often. Showing up to a meeting to complain about something or express anger about something, everybody can do that. You're just another squeaky wheel. And maybe if you're there long enough and loud enough and bring 3 more people with you, maybe you'll get the one little thing. They'll come out and clean up the brush or paint the line on the street, that type of thing. But if you're the one that shows up to the meetings and you start out with the phrase that I like my town because we had a great festival that really highlighted this. If you're the one that's showing up and pointing out the positives, even in the meekest of cities, the worst places, highlighting the things that are really important to you, it changes the whole conversation. And it's not what we're used to hearing in a public meeting and under public comment. Um, that builds credibility in the conversation because now people are when that project comes forward that we all can say is a terrible project, you have now laid the groundwork of all the things that are beautiful in the community to provide the excuse everybody needs to provide them the talking points of why that project isn't good. Or if only if it was more like this, because everybody likes this part of our community, the developer will migrate towards that. So, um, yes, you're all the elected officials, all the stuff, they have to respond to you, but be kind in that process. Be engaged. Like when we talk about being a strong citizen, that's not a loud citizen. That's not showing up at the final meeting. A strong citizen is incrementally doing that work, showing up, getting engaged. I can tell you that a cup of coffee and donuts unlock the door of our planning office all the time. The developers I never wanted to see, my staff would open the doors because they'd bring pizza or donuts or something for the office. Um, you know, these are the things, these are all humans. And then you would just ask them through, like, I don't know what the specific thing that is the challenge, but ask them about the process. What ordinance would have to change? What comprehensive plan item is encouraging this? Which elected officials have directed this stuff as a policy? That starts to get you into the fine grain of where you can actually tackle this. And most of the hard lifting is not done at the public hearing. It's done way before that, and really like pushing through that, understanding the system uh, by meeting with folks and talking to them is the way to do it.
Donna, this is close to your heart. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the question too, for the people that just feel like they're hitting a wall.
Yeah, when I heard the word petition, that's going to like just go in the trash. Um, it's absolutely correct. Call your representative, talk to them. I personally would like to sit down with the people face to face and talk to them what their issues are. And usually that negativity goes away really quickly. They're not so angry. And you are correct about, I got involved the way it was just described. There were some issues in my neighborhood, and the neighbors wanted to put together a petition, and I'm like, okay, I'll take the petition to the city. And yeah, they threw it in the trash. But then in the process, I got to know the people in public works and the people in finance and all that. So yes, when I did end up running for election, they were all happy. So, yeah. Those people that want to bring forward a petition right now may be on the board if they play their cards right. So yeah.
Yeah, be careful where you put yourself because you'll end up running for office, or you'll end up on a planning commission or a board of zoning adjustment board.
So I don't really have a question as much as a comment or an observation, and I'd like to get your reaction to it. So we just had a neighborhood walk last weekend where we walked around a neighborhood in South St. Louis, and one of our members invited a former St. Louis alderman to walk with us. So I got a chance to talk with him for about an hour as we were walking around, and I keep bringing up I'm always thinking of the potential of St. Louis to be reborn and what the future could look like, but that future is going to be 80 years down the road, right? And so these are the thoughts I'm having. I'm talking with him, and he's like, "Don't come to the elected officials with questions about visions of the future. We're worried about the potholes of the moment." Essentially, what he was saying. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Sometimes we get really lost in the weeds. Sometimes we get really stuck in this. Here's what I've been talking to, because usually the places I work, my wife jokes, everywhere I've worked is always like the last place on earth anybody would want to go. A lot of the places I would do design work, it was like picking the last skin off the bones. I mean, it was like just nothing there. What I have found with our local conversations, more than any other organization across the board, is that you are all willing to pick up your sleeves and do something. What we can help you with here through Strong Talents is help you articulate that thing you can do and inspire you to do it. So yeah, the big panic is we've got potholes in this. How do we do? Like, we're stuck with that. That's the thing that's on our mind. That's the thing we're getting the complaints on. Elected officials can't sleep at night because we can't afford to fix that, but we know that's what we need to do. Meanwhile, everything else is falling apart. When you identify something that there is a struggle, and we did this in Chisholm through our community action labs, they helped us develop a sheet because their city hall had like 6 people and no money and lots of people with opinions. So we created the 4-step process for public investment sheet for them as the complaint form, because those Midwesterners got that. They're like, oh, we have to have a complaint form. When the complaint form, we asked them the very first line, identifying what that struggle is. So not 12 struggles, not paragraphs of that in 1 or 2 sentences. What is the thing we are trying to do? Is it entrepreneurship? Are we trying to solve a street that's a mess? Like whatever that is, when you really kind of articulate it, okay, now that's manageable. The second thing is the question was not what City Hall could do, not what the state legislature could do. It was, what could we do right now to ease that problem? And we had to do as a worksheet, as an activity. So we had a whole set of like 8 or 9 lines, like a lot of lines for you to write all the things that could be done. And the knee-jerk reaction for everybody was to put, well, we can apply for a grant. Oh, we can go and ask City Hall to do this. Like all of the things that other people could do. And then we asked to like narrow down to 3 lines. What is, like, let's refine those. What could we do? And that's when the light bulb starts to hit with people. At the local conversation, if we go through that process with elected officials, what our ask is that we've identified a problem and we would like to help. And these are the gifts and resources that we have today that we could go do. This is a dangerous street. We would like to put a crosswalk in and do some optical narrowing. Will you just allow us to go put chalk paint out? Will you allow us to put cones out there? You have our number. People complain about it. We'll be out. We'll make it disappear. We'll take the heat for it. If we succeed, we'll do it together. It's a partnership we've had with you. All of our local conversations, when they have shifted this mindset of things they actually can do themselves, because you all know people and have access to things that are just unimaginable, which is great. Applying that at that most local level. So like when you start to do that, if they just allow you to do things, that's how this change occurs. And a lot of people think, oh, I can't do the pop-up event. I can't do the block party because I need some permit or permission from the city. We just need, it's like in Parks and Rec when Ron Swanson wanted to have the barbecue at the park, and he was like driving on the park and had the big barbecue grill out. And they're like, "You can't do that." He goes, "No, I can." And he brought a little piece of paper. It says Ron Swanson can do whatever he wants in a park. Sign Ron Swanson. Like, that is the permission slip. Like, you just need the permission slip to do this. You're going to take all, like, you're willing to take all the responsibility, but these are small incremental things. They're not big steps. That's what I would shift that conversation and say, look, we actually as a group would like to do something. We just need to make sure we have the permission slip to do it, that you're not going to be upset about it. Or we're going to do it at a time that you don't have staff around that write tickets and pester us. We promise to clean it up. If we don't, you can holler at us. Well, all the things. We want to do that. That I have found, and this is what's happening in Chisholm. They're moving away from these big aspirational things. They're moving away from their pothole issues. Their latest thing there are 2 traffic lights in town. They're 2 sacred traffic lights. The state says we can't afford to power them anymore. So the city, little old Chisholm, you're now going to have to be responsible to run the power. This would have probably crippled the city because the knee-jerk reaction is it's just easier to pay the bill than deal with the complaints. What they're doing in this process is they started with saying, let's just turn the lights blinking red to start and see what happens. And now they've done that for like a couple of months. And then, people, they've said what they've had to say about it. It's kind of flooded out, but everybody stops there. They say, well, it's silly the lights are blinking. These are just be simple enough to be stop signs. Now they're going to do stop signs, which cost $0. But they couldn't have jumped to stop signs. It was like they had to think what they could do at the most local level for that. But that's what I like, doing that and doing lots of those actions. I can't say that's going to change the pothole focus immediately, but it will shift that conversation that over time we won't be focused on that. But yeah, just assert a little bit more what you're going to do and say, we're going to do it. This is how we're doing it. It's kind of a smart way. If there's something that you want to undertake, we probably have an article on it. We can share 3 or 4 of those things to show what it would look like or what other people have done, and the world didn't stop. And like, people were really happy about it when it happened. It was all volunteer effort, like all of those sorts of things, just to kind of work through all of the hurdles that may be put in front of that.
Do you think that elected officials do ever think about the vision for the future, or are they just trying to see, okay, well, what can I do in the next 4 years?
Yes. It's really both ways on it. I have yet to find an elected official. Well, I think I found there's one in Illinois right now that has taken like the world by storm, and I'm like waiting for the made for TV movie. But until that point, I never found an elected official somewhere that really didn't love their community. You're being asked to do a lot to run for an election, to go through that, and then to sit through the meetings and figure out these things. And then you get told all of the secrets. Like, you get to see the full budget and you realize that now you're responsible for that. And then there's a staffing issue that comes up or a police issue that comes up. There's a lot of burdens on the folks. So elected officials are really thinking about that they're doing this because they want the best thing for their city. What many times in rational mindset, like, we have things on a list we want to check off. So if we could solve the pothole problem, we've resolved budgets and roadway maintenance, and like we've hit a couple things off the block. Or maybe that's an elected official that ran on potholes. Like, I'm going to fix every pothole in the city. So you just have to kind of like work around it. There's a really funny, I don't know which of the platforms. I think I saw it on YouTube. There's a really funny English guy that if you Google for it, what he did is he showed how he had Amazon pay to fix potholes in his neighborhood. And he did a whole bunch of different schemes. Basically what he did is he cheated Amazon. He found a loophole in their system. He bought coal patch through Amazon delivered to his house, used it to fill the potholes, filled the bags up with sand, and then returned them. And so there's some funny things about how people have done potholes. Early years of street plans did some similar things. Like if there's a street with potholes, what would it take to go get a couple bags of cold patch to fill the potholes to get over that mental block on that particular street? That could be something you do. Like we'll fill the potholes, but by the way, we also are going to narrow the lanes and get a crosswalk and have a cool block party. Just kind of work through it. But I just, it's so far off that I find that there's an elected official that is, no, I'm doing this in spite of my community. They're going to strategically do, the folks that are strategically doing things to make it to the next election, it's because they're trying to do more for their city, realizing their 2 or 4 year term isn't enough. That really, behind closed doors, that has been my experience.
All right, Edward, I have another question for you. And I want to preface this in the context of the challenge that we have with the suburban experiment because of one of the hallmarks of the suburban experiment in large part being that once a neighborhood is constructed, it needs to be built out to its finished state and then essentially left as is until significant market pressures begin to emerge and people realize maybe we need to reconsider some of the densities and provide additional housing units in these places or do modest repairs like upgrading roofs or adding an extra room or things like that. Because a question was submitted, but I wanted to preface it in the context that I think this is one of the consequences of a suburban experiment. But this person who submitted the question is on their homeowners association board, on the HOA board, and they're concerned because construction traffic is now beginning to go through their neighborhood in order to start construction in an adjacent new development. And his question is, how do I stop construction traffic through my neighborhood? But I want to challenge the premise a little bit about the fact that there should be no construction traffic in a neighborhood versus there should not be an extensive amount of constant sort of, rumbling to build an entire development. But maybe I'm putting my finger on the scales a little bit here, but it seems to me sometimes the challenge is if there's so little activity taking place in an existing neighborhood, then it feels so foreign, so threatening, so damaging for that to emerge. Respond.
When we talk about the suburban development pattern being built to a finished state, when you get to your house with the fresh lawn and the planted trees, it's complete. This is what we would call a complicated neighborhood, right? That complicated development pattern. It's done to a finished state. It is very disruptive when that happens. It's very disruptive when your neighbors decide to renovate their basement, right, and finish it. Or when they add a deck, all of a sudden they've added a deck to the back of their house. Oh my gosh, it's higher than the fence. I can see my backyard. These are in that environment, that is the radical change when we talk about radical change. So when you're in a complicated development pattern, the suburban development pattern, change is so small. Anything greater than changing the color of your house is radical in that term. So seeing the construction traffic come through, once the construction traffic finishes, now all those people are living there are going to drive through my neighborhood. That's going to be the cycle. So there's that. I would respond to that in the way you framed it, Norm, that way. I also, from somebody that has worked in a lot of these places that have seen that occur, and this is something that Ben wrote about homeowners associations. If you're on a homeowners association board, you may realize that you are responsible as the HOA for the maintenance of your roadway. So when it needs to be the snow removed from it, or the drainage needs to be replaced, or the asphalt needs to be resurfaced, the homeowners association, not the city or the state, is responsible for that. And many of these homeowners associations, paying a couple $100 a year optionally is never going to cover that. So you're seeing this enormous amount of wear and tear on your street. How do I get that fixed? That's a different problem, a different struggle. And those are things when I would do development review, trying to find the construction entrances for communities that didn't that we weren't driving over existing neighborhoods with all the heavy trucks and equipment because it will tear the road up. This is like highway level traffic on a residential street. And if that is the case and somebody is struggling that with an HOA, it is a conversation with the permitting agencies. So either your county or city to talk about this. And then preparing yourself to figure out how, like, there's a different set of questions to ask for the repair and maintenance of that as a result of that construction. So yeah, there's kind of two things. Suburban stuff, we're not expecting change. This is dramatic change, and there's gonna be more and more reasons of why that occurs. And then also just the reality of being in an HOA, you start to see the numbers, and could be a very daunting place.
It does speak to, I think, the sense of an unequal distribution of traffic impact. And if a street is suddenly turned into a road for a subset of the community to drive, at speed, the interesting thing to me is that construction traffic, it's rarely the dump trucks or the cement trucks or the trucks loaded up with rafters that are actually the menace on the street. They might, there might be a bit of a load, and if the HOA is responsible for the maintenance of those private roadways, then yeah, they're going to be, questioning how much extra weight is being added. But when you think in terms of just safety, those types of trucks, while loud, are not going to be the ones that are ripping down the street, tearing around. And so if there is a way for temporary modification for construction use, we actually, I think, need to learn more about the types of temporary modifications of streets that are done to enable safe passage of vehicles, in this case, construction traffic, so that we then say, and now that they're gone, we still have those things in place. You won't have a flagger, but you can certainly have the barricades or the cones that are set up to really throttle back vehicle speeds by creating all that edge friction, ensuring that people are able to pass through a place safely.
We adopted an ordinance, so a lot of new subdivisions, part of the development review, you have to do a transportation study. So you pay an engineering firm $60,000 to tell you how to build $1 million worth of offsite infrastructure. It's a really vicious cycle, and what I found is it resulted in all the dedicated right and left turn lanes and big traffic lights that only fueled more limited access roadways. So the jurisdiction I was at before, we said that if you had a network of streets, and we figured out that if you had to connect so many times to all the adjacent properties, no block could be so big, it matched our historic pattern. So if you met the block, like the street dimensions, so the blocks were a certain size and all the streets were interconnected and you had to connect to all the other properties, we didn't require you to do a transportation study because we knew that we could distribute all those trips equally throughout. And we were demonstrating it in town. Every time we would make little connections, we saw development increase in town while vehicle miles traveled declined. So just the opposite of what all the folks say. We showed that a network of streets, because guess what? If they're comfortable streets, people walk, they ride bikes. They don't need 6 cars. Like all of these things just started to emerge. So doing that, and then what I would use are the construction roads, the temporary access roads, to start to align that. So like some of the developments, we would require the platting of the roadway all the way through the development.
Right.
Like whatever the main line road was going to be. So if that development ever failed, if they went bankrupt, we still had that dirt available. I couldn't tell you how I would afford to build it as a city, but we had it in the public trust, the area to do it. So we didn't have to ask people for it. And I found a lot of developments that those construction roads, when they get driven over with concrete trucks and lumber trucks and all of the trades, they maintain it. All that gravel gets compacted. That gravel road is as good as most of our driving roads, and you get a lot of life out of that. And what we found, the Crush and Run was really cheap. So there were a couple neighborhoods that like we just kind of made a temporary road permanent until the next phase of development occurred, and it like residents appreciated it because it saved them 10 minutes on a trip. Like they were willing to take the fancy car on the gravel road because they're saving time and they could distribute their trips. So a couple different ways to approach that, but it is really important to look at.
We'll wrap up because I know we're at the top of the hour here, but one of the things that stands out to me is that this is one of the reasons I favor incremental development over sort of all at once development, is that, we saw this when we were down in California. You probably see this in lots of communities where you create a master plan community, then the entire place becomes moonscaped so that nothing green, nothing vibrant is there. And it just becomes a dust bowl waiting for stuff to be stuck on top, including topsoil that has to be carted in from elsewhere in order to make up what previously existed. Whereas when it's an incremental development, sort of an infill project in a particular neighborhood, yeah, you're going to have a dirt pit, but you're not going to have a moonscaped area that just sits there like an ulcer with runoff issues that are amplified by just the sheer volume of space that needs to be addressed. And then out of it, one of the things that is, maybe the most troubling is how many of our communities continue to greenlight greenfield developments or developments that are out on the edge where they're just going to do that simple, very efficient treatment, but that treatment actually has a lot of consequences while simultaneously still having so many barriers to the type of infill development that really can make a huge difference when you bring that additional investment into a place. And so if a house gets knocked down next to you, yeah, you're going to experience the dust and the noise and that sort of stuff. But what these folks are describing in terms of their HOA sort of being in the path of a twister that's just going to scrape the street or, the area bare, I'm sympathetic to that. I understand, that weariness about here we go. Like we didn't sign up for this. This wasn't in the real estate brochure, which incidentally, I think there needs to be a ban on realtors ever selling open views unless you actually have height that allows you to always be the last of the homes with a viewpoint. Because we have towers in White Rock, BC that advertise a 360-degree view. Well, that's not possible. That is
don't get me started on real estate agents.
Yeah. It's wild.
Don't get me started on real estate agents because they make lots of promises.
Yeah.
That on a regulatory side, and yeah.
Even when their phase 2 is constructed, it already disrupts the thing that they sold in phase 1. So on that note, we're going to wrap up. Thank you everybody for jumping in on office hours. Great conversation. Really appreciated this again. Next week, same place, same time, 5 on the Friday. And if you've got questions, you can always submit them ahead of time. I did share the link for if you want to do that. I hope this format, we're kind of tightening it up just a little bit because I'll tell you a secret. We're actually doing double duty here, Edward and I. We're taking some of the requests that we get by email or other things like that and being able to help address them, share the video out, including your feedback and participation in the discussion today. Share that with others that are also asking similar questions with a priority for you as members and just making the point to really kind of harness together the resources that we have. So thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the day. Good to see you all. Take care.